RTX 4070, is it good enough? Let's talk about it. This is Tech Track. Well, in Amazon, we have the RTX 4070 listed for $599. Almost all of them right here, except the overclock models, obviously. Some of them going $629, $669, $679, $729, $759, $849, and yes, $899. Well, MSRP exists for sure, and we should focus on MSRP here because I don't think you should pay even higher than $600 because, you know, it shouldn't be $600 in the first place. But you know what? That's what Nvidia chose, so let's look into the reality here. And also we have Newegg posting the same thing, $699, $599, and other prices like $669, $639. But as I said, $599 is the way to go. Also in Micro Center, we have all of them listed, similar pricing that you'll get to see, even on Best Buy. So we're looking at some trend here that, yes, the mid-range is getting higher. But is it a good buy? Because right now we have something interesting that Newegg has also posted, is that ASRock Phantom Gaming Radeon RX 6950 XT, 16 gigs, remind you that 16 gigs this is compared to 12 gigs. Obviously this is G6, not G6X, so that's not really a big deal here. Still, I mean, G6X is still faster, but higher VRAM coming with RX 6950 XT. Let's look into the pricing here, shall we? $629 is right now in Newegg. This is the latest price we're looking at. It's the $629 in Newegg. So you can get RX 6950 XT for only $629. But why am I saying this? Let's look into some benchmarks here coming from Tom's Hardware here. I'm gonna link the whole article here so you can get the whole picture. But let's look into some game restoration and ray tracing performance here. So what we're looking at is RTX 4070. Again, overclocked, we're getting 106 on average, 9 game on average, and restoration settings is ultra, so obviously the RTX 4070 is getting on stock 98 FPS compared to 6950 XT, which is 112.5. 9 game average we're looking at. And even when we overclock RTX 4070, both the FE model or even this PNY card that you're using, which is basically a very mid or entry level card, so yeah, even if you overclock it, it's getting around 105 or 106, 104, whatever you're gonna call it. It's literally getting that range, where still the 6950 XT is getting 112.5 on restoration. So in Borderlands 3, we're looking at 6950 XT is getting 139.6, and versus 4070 is getting only 103 on stock. So there's a huge gap right there. Similar case in Far Cry 6, RX 6950 XT getting 149, 150-ish FPS, whereas RTX 4070 is getting 134 max on stock. Obviously when you overclock that, it reaches closer to 143, but still RX 6950 XT is still winning. In Flight Sim, we are looking at similar trend. Again, 6950 XT is getting 87 versus 4070 is getting 81. Forza Horizon 5 also getting 6950 XT to 136, whereas RX 4070 is still lagging behind 119 FPS. Horizon Zero Dawn is also getting, I mean, not bad performance for RTX 4070 PNY edition was 140 FPS, but let's look into RX 6950 XT. Well, 165. Yeah, there's a still substantial gap there. Plague Tale Requiem, the latest DX12 title we're looking at, RX 6950 XT is also getting 71 versus RTX 4070 is getting 64 FPS. Red Dead Redemption 2 is getting 77 compared to 85 RTX 4070, of course. Total War, Warhammer 3, we're looking at something close. Like this is the only title I believe that well, the Nvidia card is winning, and not by a big margin, because as you look into it, RTX 4070 is getting 88 versus 6950 XT is getting 86. Little gap, not a big huge gap, but there is a small gap, you know, 2 FPS. And of course we see the same trend again. RX 6950 XT is getting 116 versus RTX 4070 94 FPS. So that's the restoration. Let's look into some ray tracing charts here. So we have 6 game ray tracing average we're looking at, and on average, well, in this case, you could argue that, yeah, RTX 4070 is a better buy because 50 FPS on average versus 6950 XT is getting only 41 FPS. So, yes, there is quite a lot gap we're looking at in ray tracing ultra, of course. So we're looking at Bright Memory Infinite. It's a DX, well, ray traced title we're looking at, and RTX 4070, well, I wouldn't say a huge win. RTX 4070 is getting 34 FPS versus 1650 XT is close enough, 30 FPS. So it's not a huge win here. Still, there's a gap, but very little in my opinion. And this one, you could argue there's a bigger gap here. RTX 4070 is getting 63 FPS versus 6950 XT is getting 52. Almost 11 FPS difference you're looking at. But it's only the overclocked one. When you look into the stock one, well, it's 59. Well, still, there is a... I mean, I would argue there is a bit of FPS because, 60 FPS is kind of playable, or I should say playable, whereas 52 FPS goes down with the, experience in terms of quality. So, yeah, I mean, there is some gap, but not a huge one. Cyberpunk 2077, again, don't really have any opinion to this game because it's terribly, optimized for AMD titles, for AMD GPUs, I should say. But there is a win, huge win, I would say. RTX 4070 PNY is getting 39, same with the FE edition, 39. So, and if you look into RX 6950 XT, only 29. So, not playable at all. But RTX 4070, still not playable, yet we are discussing that it's still winning. So, yeah, let's move on. Metro Exodus Enhanced, this is literally enabled by default, the ray tracing of course, and RTX 4070, when you overclock it, getting 58, non-overclocked 54, but 1650 goes down to 52. Again, there is not a huge lead. I wouldn't call this as a huge lead because only 2 FPS when you compare the stock performance. MinecraftDXR, in this case, there's a tank, huge tank for the Radeon cards here, and as you can see, only 34 FPS for the 6950 XT, but for RTX 4070 is getting closer to 60 FPS. So yeah, in this case, they're leading the chart, and that's probably the reason why they're winning in average. And lastly, we have Spider-Man Miles Morales here, and RTX 4070 stock performance is 69. When you overclock it, you get a bit of a performance out of it. 72 FPS, not bad. But also, if you look into RX 6950 XT, it's playable performance, 63 FPS. So, yeah, I mean, it's still losing, but Radeon card is still playable. So you should ask yourself that, is it good enough? RTX 4070, is that card good enough to purchase? Because we already have a deal here, ASRock Phantom Gaming, and you can get it on $629, $30 extra that you have to pay. But in terms of restoration, you can get more performance out of it, and you get more VRAM. In terms of ray tracing, you might not be able to get the full-on experience, but then again, it's not, most of the titles, it's not losing by huge margin. Yes, there are 3 titles, or 2 of them maybe, just, loses by quite a bit, but still, you should ask yourself, which one should I go for? More VRAM, more restoration, or more ray tracing? That is also another thing that you can discuss. Literally, because RTX 4070 right now pricing at $59 or $599, $600, and if you pay 30 more, you're getting a better card in my opinion, because I mean, it's still a older generation card, but when you compare the bang for the buck, right? Even though in mid-range you don't really go for bang for the buck, but still, when you consider the bang for the buck, I think ASRock is the way to go. Or the 6950 XT, this model is getting at $629. Hopefully the other cards will go down too, if it's the same trend we're looking at. Hopefully 6950 XT, you can get it on $629. Should you buy it? I mean, compared to RTX 4070, it gives you better deal in terms of restoration, and it also gives you more VRAM. So productivity, I guess it's gonna be a little bit helpful though, and AMD cards tends to not do that much benefit in terms of productivity. But when you consider gaming, well, they do deliver some punch. And it's very clear that the restoration performance right here from Tom's card we're looking at, the average FPS kind of favors the 6950 XT by a huge margin here. 112 FPS versus RTX 4070 98. So when we do the calculation here, we're getting RX 6950 XT is around 13 to 14% faster than the RTX 4070 here. So interesting. In restoration, of course, when you consider the average performance. And of course, like looking into this, like restoration is better, way better. You're paying, yes, $30 more, but you're also getting more VRAM, and it literally sets you for the future titles, because you don't have to worry about the VRAM issue, because sometimes the titles can go over, literally over 12 to 13, 14, or even somewhere around there. Some titles will in the future. Already, if you look into Last of Us remake for the PC, obviously that's not a really good example because that game is terribly optimized. that game is literally going over 10, 11 VRAM, but it says it goes only 8 gigs, but sometimes it does reach 10 in some scenarios. So, I mean, yeah, like, well, some games will go over. Yeah, you can expect, as long as the game is optimized, that's not gonna be a huge issue. But if it isn't, then we can ask that for long run, of course, because obviously not every people will buy a GPU every single year. Obviously not. You want to go for something that will settle you for upcoming 2, 3, or even 5 years. Who knows? So which card are you gonna go for? RTX 4070 or 6950 XT? Because the price difference is not a huge anymore. So choose wisely.